It's recording.
Greetings, comrades. We are here today to discuss on two very important subjects. In the course of the last year and a half, great events have taken place in the Western Hemisphere and in India. Big mobilizations around the questions of race and caste have shaken America and the entire Western world and India to its core. Even now, mobilizations around caste injustices continue in India, even as a farmer protest mobilizes people in the tens of millions. In the United States and Brazil and even in Europe, the Black Lives Matter movement and the mobilizations against police brutality on the basis of racism have left an indelible mark on the society and culture of these countries, and they have changed the political discourse around the question of race. We have with us comrades from the international, Comrade Blanca, Comrade Eduardo Almeida, Comrade Fabio Bosco. Together we shall discuss on the question of racism in the West and of caste injustices and the fight against it in India. So without further ado, I give the mic to Fabio Bosco, who may introduce us to the question of racism in Brazil and the movements around it. Hello, Fabio.
Hello. Lal salam to all sisters and brothers. First, I'd like to make some brief remarks on the situation of the world economy and the pandemic. This year, we had a very different moment in terms of international economy. The second quarter, the world economy decreased around 10%. It's the largest decrease since the 1929 depression. And the recovery is still to be seen. The IMF predicts that this year we'll have a negative GDP around 4.4%. And for next year, they hope the economy will full recover. That means go back to the levels it was before the pandemic. But in terms of this recovery does not mean that the working class will have the same jobs, the same rights, the same wages, the same funding for public education, public health care, as they used to have before the pandemic. Because this recovery is being done on the expense of the workers and the people's rights. So this is very important for us to see that the situation that we are living now for the working class will not improve. It will be very bad, even if the economy recover to the same levels we used to have before the pandemic. About the pandemic itself, now we are seeing a hike in terms of deaths and people that are contaminated. And despite of the fact UK started today mass inoculation, the situation is that we have already 1.5 million deaths across the world, and the experts does not expect there will be enough vaccines for all the people till the end of next year. So it means that we will be living with the pandemic through all the next period. These two issues, the bad shape of the world economy and the situation of the pandemic, has a responsible, and the responsible is capitalism. The responsible are the capitalists, the big corporations, who are the ones who are ruling the whole world for in their benefit. And why we say that? Some people say, oh, okay, the pandemic is due to nature. That's not true. Capitalism has been destroying nature. Capitalism has been destroying the healthcare systems across the world. And so that today it's the working class primarily who are paying with their lives for this pandemic and who are paying with their jobs and their labor rights for the economic crisis. So the main issue we have to address is how to fight back capitalism, how to finish capitalism, how to fight back the big corporations which rule the world. I'm sorry. In order to overcome capitalism, we need two issues. The first one, we need the working class to move, the working class to stand up and fight back. And fortunately, we have been seeing many big struggles, uprisings, revolutions in different parts of the globe. I'd like to mention two of them. Sorry. The first one is the mass demonstrations that we had in the US against police brutality, for Black rights, for social justice that happened this year in hundreds of cities that were very influential across the world. And the other one I would like to mention is the revolution that started in Chile last year. It was a great revolution, a revolution for basic rights like free public education, proper pensions, women's rights, a new constitution, and to put down the Piñera administration. This revolution put thousands and thousands in the streets across the country. So what we see is that to overcome capitalism, we need the working class to stand up. And we are very happy that today in India, the farmers carried out a huge mobilization for their rights. So if we are fortunate to have all these mobilizations, the other issue that we need to address is the issue of a revolutionary party, of a revolutionary leadership. And that's what we want to talk to you. And why? Because in the last decades, we have been living through huge mobilizations, revolutions. But the main point is that we need a revolutionary leadership in order to help these revolutions to win, to seize power, and to expand worldwide. I used to give an example that revolutions are like football teams, are like cricket teams. They need a coach. The coach helps to organize the team to fight, to go ahead, to win, to score. And so what's the main problem that we have today is that we don't have a revolutionary party organized in each part of the globe. We see in India, for instance, in India, there are some large organizations that has origin in the working class. You have the CPM, you have the CPI, you have plenty of MLs, but we see that, for instance, the CPM, when they rule West Bengal, they did not move in direction of fighting back capitalism. On the opposite. They did very bad things like the crushing the peasant uprising in underground years ago. And they have a permanent alliance, a politics of permanent alliance with the bourgeoisie, with the Congress Party. With this leadership, the Indian Revolution will never be able to win. This leadership prevents the working class and the peasantry to put together and to fight and defeat capitalism. I know that when we talk about building a revolutionary party in a country like India, it's a huge country. It's not an easy task, but we have to start it. If we don't start, it will never be achieved. The Indian working class, the Indian peasantry will fight and fight and fight, but they will not be able to seize power. And so I think that the main issue we should address in this conference, in this talk, is about the need of building a group. It will be small in the beginning, it will be weak in the beginning, but with a revolutionary orientation, it will be possible to move ahead, to build it, and to offer an alternative for the Indian Revolution and the world revolution. I will stop here. I want to listen all comrades who are here, and then we may come back to have another input.
Definitely. This was very insightful and very pointful presentation given by Comrade Fabio. Definitely, with the kind of leadership that exists today, we've seen protests emerge, mobilizations get built up, and then they just fizzle out. And this becomes a vicious cycle. So I would like to take the mic to Blanca to hear something about the situation in the United States relating to movements against racism and where that figures into our global understanding.
Thank you.
Blanca?
Yes. So I want to echo a little bit the beginning Fabio gave us by rooting our conversation in this global pandemic and the health crisis. Because in the United States, as you know, is the #1 country in terms of deaths and contagions. Just to give you some numbers, we have now 280,000 casualties. So more than 250,000 people have died in our country. And we have more than 15 million people who have been infected by the virus. And one of the big questions here in the United States, given that is supposedly the richest country of the world, is that we do not have a public healthcare system. We don't have universal healthcare. So we have close to 50 million Americans and people who live in the US who do not have health insurance, right? So that's something to have in mind. But I want to talk also about the incredible mobilizations we saw this year around, I mean, with the slogan Black Lives Matter, but there were mobilizations against police violence, racist police violence, but also in general against racism in this country and against police violence in this country, right? And before speaking more in detail about what happened starting in May 2020 after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, I wanted to give a little context that this last mobilization was the last instance of what we saw, a deepening political crisis in the United States. When we say political crisis, we say that since 2016, we realized that the two big parties that have been alternating in power, the Republican and the Democratic Party, which are bourgeois parties, capitalist parties, have lost legitimacy and have lost the support of the majority of working people. And that for us was expressed in a double phenomena. On the one hand, the raising of Trump as a candidate, of course, of the right wing, but it's a right wing populist candidate that pretends to be an outsider of the establishment, right? Who appealed to a growing mass of impoverished white working class people who live in rural areas, right? And on the other hand, the emergence of something that was kind of unheard of in the United States, which is like a so-called independent candidate that fought for the Democratic Party ticket, Bernie Sanders, under the slogan of socialism. And the fact that in the US, socialism became like a popular thing in 2016, and the youth was kind of looking for socialism, also meant that the youth was looking for a socialist solution to the political crisis we found ourselves in. And, you know, linked in this process, we saw the growth of a social democratic organization that was very small, that now has 70,000 members, the DSA, that kind of captured in part some of these aspirations to break with what is considered the political establishment, what is considered like the fact that Democratic Party and Republican Party are the same when they're in power, they impose the same kind of policies against working people, et cetera, et cetera. And within this political crisis, I think we have seen two big phenomena of class struggle that were also unheard of. The first one was a wave of wildcat strikes that began in 2018 in the southern states where unions are illegal, that were led by rank and file teachers that shut down several states. One was West Virginia, then it spread to Arizona, to Kentucky, to Oklahoma, and to Colorado. And that completely shifted the arena to organize, because the strike, which is highly illegalized in the United States, and only workers with unions there to strike, but the union leadership have abandoned the tactic of the strike. So if you're in a union for the past 40 years, it's a very bad thing to go on strike. Suddenly, thanks to the heroic strikes of teachers and public workers in these southern states that managed to gather around many sectors of the community and to win demands from their governors, the strike tactic became the new preferred tactic workers were asking for. And so the impact of these strike waves was very important for the year after, because the year after there were a lot of union contract negotiations happening in the private and the public sector, and many union locals went on strike. So we have seen in 2018, 2019, a peak of labor combativity. Here in California, where we organized, we had most of the school teachers and the unions went on important strikes in Los Angeles, in Oakland. Now there's a strike preparing with the pandemic is hard, but maybe in San Francisco. And also we saw a very important strike of the most important industrial sector, which is the auto sector. General Motors did an historic strike in 2019 last year, which shut down all of its plants against a two-tier system, right? So there was a first kind of a wake up, if you want, of a labor movement that was considered dormant, unions are done, the working class is dead, right? That exploded where people did not expect it. And then what we saw this year was a new movement against police brutality, because we know this is not the first time we have a movement against police violence. It's kind of an endemic and recurring thing under US capitalism to have Black youth, and with a solidarity this time of Latino, Asian, and white youth, to take a stand against police violence. And we had under Obama a first movement of Black Lives Matter, if you remember, but this time we had a mobilization that was also unprecedented. The country went through 2 continuous weeks of daily mobilizations, which have not been seen since 1968 with the murder of Martin Luther King at a national level, or even 1992 with the murder of Rodney King in LA, which spread maybe 3-4 days of massive demonstrations and riots all over the country. So this year we have 2 weeks of protest that had small actions or big actions in more than 600 cities in this country. So there was not a single state that was not touched by this mobilization. And in response to this mobilization, we also saw the brutal repression of the state, both in Republican states and in Democratic states, both in Republican governed cities and Democratic governed cities. I will not fail to remind people that Minneapolis, where George Floyd was killed, is a Democratic governed city in a Democratic governed state, right? So that was a big crisis for the Democratic Party too. And so in response, the National Guard was mobilized in 33 states, and we had curfews in more than 100 cities. And despite the attempts to repress and shut down this protest, there were counter-protests mobilized against the curfews, against the presence of the National Guard, and we participated actively of these protests. And to some degree, the attempt to repress this movement was defeated. Another characteristic of this movement is that this movement was not calling anymore for police reform, which has been the traditional way through which these movements against racist police violence are channeled. What is suggested is that police get better training, that they go through different workshops, that they understand what racism is. The violence of this movement was also violence directed at the state as an institution. And one of the things we saw is like youth, like a coalition of working class youth led by Black youth, surround the sites of state power and threaten the sites of state power. So police stations were surrounded and set in fire. Courthouses were surrounded and set in fire. City councils were surrounded and set, like there was a deep hatred of the state. There was not a desire to see small increments, small steps. There was a desire to change everything because people cannot take it anymore. And so this intense polarization that was kind of the marker of the, usually we see this at the end of a movement, and that was the characteristic of the beginning of this explosion, was also expressed in very radical demands posed by these youth that also we did not expect. The first demand was to defund the police. That is to say, to take money away of all police budgets, because this crisis is happening, of course, in the midst of a pandemic. And in the youth in the streets was connecting, right, the problem of police violence to the fact that the majority of victims of COVID-19 are Black and brown people because they occupy what we call the frontline jobs, right, in the service industry. The majority of nurses in the hospitals are workers of color, etc. And also because they are the first ones, the ones who died in a higher proportion because they have a worse access to healthcare in general. So they don't have the same ways to have access to medicine. So these mobilizations asked to defund the police, and in some cases they asked to abolish the police, which was a demand none of us expected to see, kind of the demand to abolish the bourgeois state or to abolish the forces of repression of the bourgeois state, which captured it. And I think in our discussions with these youth, the demand to abolish the police was a desire to not fall again in the same trap over and over, where the demands of the street are recuperated and co-opted by the Democratic Party to run for election. So it was to raise the most radical demand possible that the Democratic Party could not play with. And I say this because, as you know, and you imagine you have followed, we just finished in the year of this grandiose demonstration, an electoral campaign that got Biden elected and Trump out of office. And one thing that is pretty remarkable is that in this electoral campaign, the Democratic Party failed to give an answer to many of the problems of the working class, all of the problems of the working class, but particularly the problem that was posed by this historical mobilization, which is its relation to the police and what they're going to do with the police and the relation with Black youth. To the demand to defund the police and to question the role of police in society, Biden responded with almost the same message as Trump, that he believes the majority of police are doing the good job, that this is just a problem of a few corrupt policemen that can be removed, and that he thinks we need to put more money into the police, not less. So we need to refund the police and we need to give training to the police officers. And surprisingly, for some, not for us, Bernie Sanders, who supposedly was a candidate of the left, of the socialist left, sided completely with Biden on this issue. He had the same position, that he was a defender of state institutions, that he was in favor of giving more money to the police, and that he thought also that the problem would be solved if we did more racial bias trainings to the police officers. This is very important because one of the big questions that is posed to us with the election of Biden, and I will talk a few minutes because I don't want to talk too long about the implications of this election. One of the big questions posed to us is that is the election of the Democratic Party candidate going to close this period of political crisis and mobilization, right? Usually we know when big crises emerge in bourgeois democratic countries, the best way to stop the struggle is to have a supposedly progressive candidate run for office. In this country is the Democratic Party, win the elections and appease the situation. And in our opinion, the fact that on the question of racist police violence, All candidates of the Democratic Party sided to defend and protect state institutions and failed to make any, even a verbal or rhetorical concession, because we know they promise a lot of things and they don't do it, but even rhetorically, they failed to break ranks with police institution, with the military. We think that this is a sign that we will see more protests, because if we remember, the first wave of Black Lives Matter happened under a Black president, the first Black president, Obama. So because nothing has changed in the relation of police and policing, and despite many local attempts of reform and many city councils are discussing and independent review boards, but in the grand scheme of things, nothing has changed. So we think that it is very likely that we're going to see more mobilizations on this issue, maybe even with more rage, because we have now a vice president, Kamala Harris, who's a black president, and by the way, who has an awful record in terms of a criminal justice reform, because she was the general attorney here in California, and she was responsible for putting many, many Black and brown youth in jail. But we don't think, we're talking about a little bit the connection between police violence and the pandemic. And there are three other crises of the working class that we think Democratic Party is not solving, is only aggravating, and Biden will not solve. The first is, as I said at the beginning, the sanitary crisis, right? I gave you the numbers of the situation. We have more than 50 million infected, more than 250,000 people dead. Projections are that maybe by election day, because now we're reaching 200,000 infections a day. And then now Christmas is coming, and we have not really taken any real social distancing measures coordinated in this country, right? It's very patchwork. Every state, every county does its thing. It's very likely we might have maybe 400,000 dead by the time of the inauguration, right? Which is, it's astronomical, the number, like it's more than World War II casualties. So that's a big problem, because the problem of lack of access to healthcare and the problem of access to the vaccine and distribution of the vaccine, even in the richest country of the world, these issues have not been solved, right? They have not been solved because the US lacks any infrastructure to provide a public service and to provide public access of basic needs in terms of healthcare. And the second crisis is, of course, the economic crisis with a peak in unemployment. I think many of you might have followed that around the peak of the unemployment crisis was in around April and May, we had 21 million unemployed. Now it's down to 10 million, but still 10 million people unemployed is a lot of unemployed. And Biden now has promised to put 3 million Americans back to work with a plan of public works. First, we need to see that happen, because he will not get into office until the end of January. And then he needs to pass his law and agree with Republicans, right? And the problem is that people cannot pay their rent this month. People cannot eat this month. People are losing their houses because they cannot pay mortgages this month. So we have been extended moratoriums on evictions, but the public aid, the state has ended. Some programs ended end of July. Others are ending by the end of the year. And if there is not extra aid package, the social situation is going to explode, because poverty is rising, right? We have 5 more million poor people living under poverty level since the beginning of the pandemic, which is totally, we have around 50 million Americans who are below the poverty line. It's a lot of people who are doing the line for the popular soup, to go to the nonprofits to be able to eat. So the social crisis is exploding. And the last crisis I want to mention to you is, of course, the environmental crisis. Because 2020, for many of us who live in certain parts of this country, was a complete nightmare in terms of the environment. In California and in Colorado, the fires that devastated this country have been tremendous this year. We have lost 4 million hectares of forestry, which is the record of any year. So we have lost this year the equivalent of the past 5 years of fires, which were already top fires. So this is the top fire season, but by very far. And it's completely linked to 2 phenomena. The first one is climate change, because of course the climate is drier. We also now have dry storms that start fires in the middle of the summer. Now we are in December, and we've been told that it's so hot in California that we might have fires next week, right? So the country is burning. And the second effect of climate change for the states that live in the south are the hurricanes and tornado season. This year has not been only the worst fire season for California and the United States, it's also been the worst tornado and hurricane season, because we know that the increase of water temperature makes that more tornadoes and hurricanes form in the Caribbean, and then they hit the south of the United States. And this is a huge problem because it's linked to climate change. And I will remind you that Biden made very clear that he will not break with the oil-based industry and the fossil-based industries. He defended very adamantly the right of fracking and gas extraction. And that was very surprising. And for many sectors, that he was so clear on that during the campaign when he was under attack by Trump. And he proposes a green revolution, but it's a long transition. By the time we go to the so-called green energy, the environment will be destroyed. And so working people, because all the folks who live in these areas who are populated, were, Paradise, an entire town burned in California and people died, right? And the same thing in the South, people are flooded. We have a Carmel living right now in the South of the United States. This is the 10th evacuation he has, and he just moved there, right? So how can you live in a place where you're constantly having to evacuate because your house might be flooded? So we have like a real emergency around climate. But the second thing has to do with the big corporations who control some of the basic access. Many of the fires in California are due to the fact that the big electric company, PG&E, refuses to take some basic measures to prevent fires, like to clean around the infrastructures. So when some sparks start, they don't start a fire, or to put most of the cables underground instead of, right? So there are some basic things we could do even while we try to transition to a different form of economy, an ecological friendly economy that is not based on fossil fuel, things we could do to prevent the deaths that are coming today because of climate change. So I wanna finish my talk, because I suspect I've been talking too long, by going back to what Fabio was saying. All of these crises, the crisis of police violence and racism, the crisis of economic poverty and lack of employment, the crisis around the pandemic, the environment, we know they're all linked. They have a common source, which is capitalism. And we also have seen this year that working people can change things. They can change the narrative. They can show things that were thought impossible can change. We're striking again, we're mobilizing again. We have the same capacity to stop everything like we had in the 60s, because what happened in this country, people were saying, we haven't seen this like since the 1960s. So the idea that working people can do a revolution is a present reality. It's in everybody's consciousness, but what is lacking terribly is the lack of organization of our working people. The fact that Black Lives Matter movement was not able to drag with itself the union movement, the immigrant rights movement, to shut down the country. Like that there was a lack of connection between one struggle and the other. And the lack of organization of our class, right, to have its own forms of power and struggle, and the lack of connection between the different struggles with a clear leadership, which is the lack of a revolutionary party, these are things that depend on us. And actually, if we do not change them now, we might not have a chance to change them in the future. There might be no future, because usually we say socialism or barbarism, and for my generation, comrades, is socialism or extinction. So I do think we do have a big urgency to figure out together how we build national sections of revolutionary parties that are internationally coordinated. And that's why we are building the IWL. So I'll stop here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what the Indian comrades have to say.
Right. This was a very good presentation, Comrade. It gives us a very clear understanding of the situation in the United States and of the various forces that are at play here. It certainly clarifies what the Biden presidency is going to be for the foreseeable future, and the limits of what mobilizations have taken place under the leadership that has been present so far. Now, before we move on to the Indian side of things, I would request Comrade Eduardo to speak a little bit about mobilizations in Brazil. One minute.
forgive me. First of all, I have to greetings to Nitin and Sajid that. Hi Nitin, hi Sajid.
Hi.
Hi Sajid. Nitin, are you reading? Are you listening? Nitin? Well, something more about the international situations before Brazil. We had in these last years governments of ultra-right as Trump in the United States, as Bolsonaro in Brazil, as Piñera in Chile, and as Modi in India. And there is a great crisis, economic and political crisis, with the pandemic, with the recessions. And the bourgeoisie are trying to change his face in a lot of countries with the democratic ways to change these governments to governments of democratic face. So this is happening in the United States, as Blanca said, with Biden. And this has happened too in Chile, because the elections, in the elections, the Constituent Assembly had a victory, and say they are trying to canalize the mobilizations to the democratic regime. This is too happening in Bolivia, that we had a coup, a military coup, and it was defeated and has win the candidate of Evo Morales, and he really it's happened, begins to happen in Brazil too, because in the election of Brazil, Bolsonaro was defeated. It's a large defeat in Brazil. Their candidate, there were elections in Brazil to local candidates, not to election of presidents, but the candidates of Bolsonaro was defeated. It's very important, because we had to face governments with a distant way, but there are governments, bourgeoisie governments. It's very important, because we have to fight against the reformist party that will be supporting this type of government. In Brazil too, we had a defeat of the Worker Party. Bolsonaro was defeated, but Worker Party has not grown. It was defeated too. There were not cities, very important cities, that the Worker Party had won. It's very important. There was a victory of the right parties, liberal right parties, not the ultra-right as Bolsonaro, but not the Worker Party. And in 3 cities, we had the important growth of the left reformist parties, not the Worker Party, but the PSOL. It's very important in Sao Paulo, and very important too in Belém. And in Porto Alegre, very important election too from the PCdoB. But only in Belém, PSOL has won. So this election in Brazil are part of a movement of the political situation of Brazil. There's no great mass mobilizations, and so it's not reflects on the election of great mass mobilization. There was a victory of the liberal right, not the ultra-right parties. That's all.
Thank you, Comrade Eduardo. This gives us an understanding of what's going on in the West in relation to the mobilizations and the class struggle there. Definitely, we have to have an understanding rooted in the need for building a revolutionary international party. And it is only through that that we can overcome this crisis of leadership that plagues the working class and its mobilizations, or stifles our struggles and makes it fail, essentially. So, with that said, I wish to shift now towards the Indian side of things. In recent months, I would say, although it's been building up for some years now, with the Modi government in power, initially there was a period of lull, a period of reaction. One could say that there was a depression after this immense and sudden aggressive reaction that pressed against us. But this was not a permanent state of things. The setbacks were temporary. Almost immediately after the Modi government came to power, there was an important mobilization against the proposed land bills that would make it easier to acquire lands for corporations. This land bill was forced to be withdrawn by the government. Here there was a mobilization by the rural masses and the urban masses. Though it was led by the mainstream political parties, this was an important victory. And it showed that this government could be challenged. Later on, much bigger mobilizations did break out. The most recent and most startling one was the movement against the Citizenship Amendment Act that would make religion a category of citizenship in India. Many Indians did not accept this. Not just the minority community, but many in the majority community did not accept this. And what triggered a national uprising against it was the use of police brutality and the use of police in breaking up the protests in the Aligarh Muslim University. Videos were taken, it was shared widely, it was broadcasted on television, and it electrified the people. Hundreds of youths came out on the street. People in the cities came out on the streets by thousands. Shaheen Bagh in New Delhi became an epicenter of this national movement against what was really an attack on the secular fabric of India. And this movement went on. It seemed to be unstoppable till the coronavirus pandemic hit. And suddenly this government had the tools at its disposal to control mass mobilizations with the excuse and fear-mongering around COVID. True, there was some justification to restrictions, but this government used it for political ends. The Shaheen Bagh mobilization was ended, restrictions were brought in, and one of the main things that defined this lockdown, that defined this COVID period for Indians was the thorough and complete lockdown of services and transportation and of ordinary life, really, that disrupted the lives of migrant workers and poor across the country, causing immense hardship. Even now, recordings are still available of news reports of migrant workers walking thousands of kilometers to try and get back home from the capital city and from other economic hubs like Bombay, and they died by the hundreds on the streets trying to get back home. The government had a very ham-handed and authoritarian approach towards implementing the lockdown, and it was brazenly classist. While middle class and upper middle class NRIs were allowed the best of services, the poor migrant worker was subjected to brutal harassment at the hands of the police. He was subjected to ignominious treatment, and as a result, hundreds simply died trying to get back home. The actual number will never be known because the government has actually not maintained statistics on the deaths of migrant workers. It was up to NGOs and other independent organizations to expose the extent of this problem. And despite this, India could not contain the COVID pandemic. We probably are the second most affected country in the world in terms of number of COVID patients and one of the top 4 countries in number of COVID deaths. So clearly this government, which showed to everyone that it does not care about the people of the country, it does not care about the poor of the country, this government has utterly failed to save the lives of thousands of Indians despite these authoritarian lockdowns, which caused almost as much destruction as it purported to save. In this context, we come to 2 important mobilizations. One was around the end of September. This focused around the Hathras, the rape of a Dalit girl in the town of Hathras in the North Indian state of UP. Here, what happened was, this was a caste-related attack. This is unfortunately not unique in India. It is unfortunately and very shamefully a common thing for Dalit youths and Dalit men and women to be subjected to violence and murder at a daily rate, at a daily basis. What was different now is that this rape caused a mass mobilization against the UP authorities, against the state authorities, which tried to cover up the murder and rape of this girl so brazenly that they were willing to crash into the victim's family home and take out the corpse and make a summary cremation to hide the evidence. That this government in UP, which is also run by the same far-right party that dominates the parliament, in fact, an even worse character in UP runs that state called Yogi Adityanath. This government very brazenly showed that they were with the upper caste wing of the society and that they are willing to dishonor and disparage the dead body of a Dalit girl, robbing her of the dignity in death to shield the upper caste perpetrators of this crime. This was like the breaking of the last straw on the camel's back. It's like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Mobilizations were national. There were mobilizations in North India, solidarity mobilizations in Eastern India, in Bengal, solidarity mobilizations in Central India, in Pune, Nagpur, and Bombay. And these protests continued. Really. Even now, I believe that some mobilizations are still continuing around this. But this is not an isolated event. The question of caste in India is almost as fundamental as the question of the class struggle, because these two oppressions actually overlap. The way the Indian capitalist system has evolved, it has incorporated earlier existing caste divisions into its fold. So the Dalit worker, the Dalit section of the society is condemned to the most oppressed and most least paid and exploited wing of the Indian working class. These dynamics are important to understand if we are to build, if we are to direction. On this note, I would like to give the mic to Nitin Ghodke, who is a Dalit activist based in Pune. He has been associated with the Elgar Parishad and he is currently still an activist in Pune. Nitin? Comrade Nitin?
Yes, Adiraj.
Yes, we would like you to speak a little bit about the mobilizations around the Hathras issue and the Elgar movement, which was trying to bring together all the movements of the oppressed in Pune.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Could you please repeat what you said just now?
Yeah, we would like you to speak about the movement against caste violence in the Hathras rape case and the Elgar movement.
Yeah, yeah. You already discussed about Hathras, na?
Yeah, I would like you to speak more about it.
No, no, not necessary. I can say something about Yalgar Parishad.
Yes, please, please do.
Okay. Just now I'm coming from the meeting of Yalgar Parishad team. So actually, on this 31st of December, it is the third anniversary of Yalgar Parishad. So all the team and committee members of the Elgar Parishad wants to actually again arrange this Elgar Parishad one more time, not at the exactly same way which happened in a previous, but they want to so they want to actually start like every year. This Elgar Parishad must be like celebrated that day, but because of this all the uh, teammates from the Elgar Parishad, like 3-4 members of the Elgar Parishad got jailed because of that fear. So this committee wants to remove that fear from among all the peoples, among all the activities. So in the next 12th or 13th of this month, again all Maharashtra state level meeting is going to be held, and again all the activists like Kolse Patil, that High Court judge, retired High Court judge, then Hassan Mushrif, then reporter, like all these peoples are going to be take initiative for this Elgar again. So that was the meeting held here. So I will update all the details in the next meeting.
So, can you tell us something of the goals and vision of the Elgar Parishad?
Actually, Elgar Parishad main motive, actually it is against for this rightist government of India and this BJP brutality against the workers, against the farmers, against the Dalit activists, against the other backward classes activists. So this is the movement against this leftist organization. It is against the RSS propagandas, RSS agendas. Then it is for the mobilization of all the leftist organizations, for all the Dalit and Ambedkarites organizations in state of Maharashtra. So and one is like this Elgar is against the Brahminism. This Elgar is against the uh, this Modi government and the Shah government.
So, can you tell us something of the first Elgar Parishad? What was it like?
Yes, first Elgar Parishad was held at the 31st of December 1917. It was basically brainchild of Supreme Court, retired Supreme Court judge uh, B.J. Kolshe Patil and another P.B. Sawant. This was the brainchild of that two guys. Later, we invited like Prakash Ambedkar, then Bhim Army chief, like all these activists get invited for that organization. In that organization, there was the total voice against Modi government. This was the total voice against the casteism. This was the against all the all kind of uh, discrimination done by Brahminism. So it was the total Yelgar. We say it is the big voice against the discrimination, against the right organization RSS. So in that one, that day, some songs sung by activists. Then that we say they broken the illusionary actually parts of this like Kshatriya, Vaishya, Brahman and Shudras. So they want to break that system of discrimination. So they did the same in that Yelgar Parishad. Then all the activists, main activists or invitees talk about this Modi government brutality, their uh, anti actually what we say their
Anti-people's policy.
anti-constitution activities they are doing in parliament, as well as they are working anti-constitution through the police, this policing and all. So they talk about this one. They talk about discriminatory policies of Hindutva of RSS, and because of that, actually, they are saying so. 1st of Jan in Bhima Koregaon, there was a big attack on these peoples from the rightist organizations, people, RSS people. So one Hindutva committee, Ekbote and Ekbote team, and there is another one called, what is the name?
Bide,
Guruji, Bhide,
Bide Guru.
Bhide Guruji. So against the peoples from their organizations attacked the Dalits in Bhima Koregaon. Yeah, and but even only the Ekbote has jailed for he's jailed for the day. Then later he get the bail, but even the main part of that attack, that Bhide is not even jailed, even he is not asked by the police, but the Elgar Parishad teammates were just last month 3 members of the Elgar Parishad, that is the Kabir Kala Manch people, have been jailed. The current situation of case is just last couple of days back, the charge sheet have been registered now. So in remaining activities now they don't have a fear to get attacked. So today's meeting was like that.
This is
Yes,
very interesting to know, and it is definitely interesting that the struggle is continuing. We wish you all the well, wish you all the best, and our fullest support behind it. Now, in the next segment, I propose that we discuss some strategies and how we can express solidarity with each other. We'll give each of us 5 minutes to discuss some ideas about seeing common parallels between the struggle against caste in India and the struggle against racism in the United States, and in the context of building a revolutionary party and taking these movements in a revolutionary direction. First of all, I believe that the international is a great instrument of combining these struggles and giving it a global character. By doing that, it amplifies its strength and impact. So if a movement of Dalits in India gets support from a movement of the oppressed races in Brazil and America, it is a great boost to their morale. And additionally, it provides an external pressure against the governments of both countries. Likewise, if Dalits of India give their support to the mobilizations in America and Brazil and the West, it acts as a great boost for the morale of the people fighting on that side, and the reactionary governments that they fight against face an additional pressure. So, Comrade Blanca, any comments?
Well, I mean, I'm learning a lot in this conversation about the struggle against caste oppression in India. As you were speaking, Nitin, I was looking on the Elgar Parishad event and the cultural significance of these cultural organizations that have these events that have a big political dimension, which I'm quite familiar with as I come from Catalonia in Spain, and I know how culture and politics are very often intertwined, especially when there's a element of historical oppression, but also here in the United States. I do think, one question that is posed to us as revolutionaries is how do we support from within these movements for against any form of oppression, right? And at the same time, we build links with other sectors of society, in particular the working class, to support them. And I think one of the big challenges is to, at least in the case of the United States, when we're talking about the fight against anti-Black racism or Latino rights, is to bring these discussions into working class organizations. In the case of the US, for example, our unions, our workplaces are divided around race lines. And I suspect in India, it's also a similar dynamic. And so there is a tendency to separate and compartmentalize these struggles, to do like unionism or syndicalism, economic struggle on the one hand, and do the political on the other. And I think the importance of a political organization is to be able to organize both. I think that by exchanging our views on this, we can learn from each other's experiences about how we can, knowing that there are big differences between the US and India, of course, but how we can do this work. That are the first things that come to mind, listening to your presentations and educating myself also about the anti-caste and anti-oppression struggles in India, which I think have a lot of common points with the US, but also some important differences, historical differences.
Okay, that was a very pertinent point to make. Comrade Pushkar, would you like to give some comments?
There was a project named Obama Singh Project. It was launched during Obama administration in USA, and Manmohan Singh, under Prime Ministership of Manmohan Singh, it was joint venture by USA and India. And the purpose of that project was to see the common links between the Black struggle in USA and the caste struggle in India. So we were knowing that anyway, it is the government sponsored project. So it has its own limitations, but at least to get some data, we got a huge data because it was pan university project. So it was I was there to create the questionnaire and create the survey for that project. Ultimately, the purpose of the project was to create some kind of cultural or dialogue center So it was some kind of prescriptive and very narrow, not even minimalist, but very narrow kind of way ahead in addressing this thing. But during that process, I got few insights about this class and this caste struggle in India, and the race, and basically the struggle about people with colors in USA. So there are a lot of similar points because basically the way of operation they face are similar. And we also had dialogue with the students in USA, black students in USA, and it was dialogue between the Dalit students in India and the black students in USA about how the operation or what kind of a kind of marginalization they face during their whatever college activity. But again, the thing is that this kind of operation is not just limited to the campus, and we can't address them within the campus. We came to this conclusion, but we couldn't do anything because it was state-sponsored project to run something into university, and that also joint venture of USA and India. So basically, the dynamics within campus is different than the dynamics outside campus, and this dynamics changes from the location to location. So that thing was different, and that was insight. Similarly, we also concluded few differences, that what are the differences between the caste system in India, which is by birth, but also it is a combination of material reality and also a social reality combined. Because the caste, for example, the Dalit caste or some other caste are prohibited from holding a property in India historically. So they are Indians, and ethnicity or racism is not that much charged term in India. So it is possible, means we thought that it is possible to build a solidarity struggle, but we also have to recognize the differences, or the differences between the caste system and the racism which is present in USA. So that way, I'll share with you all few findings or few discussions we had, because I was also a guinea pig of that project. So so the first, we were also participated in creating the questionnaires, but we were also the first one who solved the questionnaires, some 200-300 students, and then it was implemented all over the university, around 50,000 students in my university where I was studying. So I'll share the findings soon. What were they? So we can work on that. Thank you.
Comrade, can you just email us the documents?
Yes, the findings, there is just a word file of our findings, and what were the problems also. Like, we also included the questions related to sexuality and all other very, very minor details. When that got censored, then many questions were removed. Very nice questions were removed, because many important questions were also removed. Because this cross-sectional understanding, we wanted to include that, and the state authority never wanted that in those questionnaires.
We'll be very interested in receiving this document. If you can send us the video.
Yes, sure.
I would like to talk something about, in this moment, there's a lot of great mobilizations against oppression in the world. The struggles against racism as the United States, the struggles against machismo of the women, the struggles about the immigrants too. And this are a very important phase, very important part of the struggles, the mass movement in the world. But nothing, a lot is not new. It's not new in the world. The struggles against castes in the India is not a part of this mass mobilization against the oppressor in the world. No, in the world. It's not no in the world. It's as a trouble of India. It's not a trouble of India. It's a part of mobilization, international mobilization against oppressors. It's important that if you can to put this in the first stage in the against the strikes, the mobilization against oppression in the world. So I think it's possible to have some initiatives from this meeting. One of these is to do an article about this trouble, the mobilization against caste in India, with this moment, but not only this moment, the historical trouble of caste in India, and in the relation with the mass mobilization against oppression in the world, but talking about castes and talking about mobilization now in caste. I think it's very important if Hathras and Nitin can do, and with the Pushkar can do, the three can do an article about this, that we can publish it in the IWL website. Another level of this is the solidarity. We can do it with an initiative about the statement that Hathras had write about the mobilizations with the network of solidarity and struggles in the world. It's possible now. Fabio is part of the direction of this network, international network is here. In the another level, and that I think it's most important of the three, is link the vanguard of this type of mass mobilizations with the Revolutionary Party. And so it's important to link Nitin and the comrades that are in front of the mass mobilizations. I was waiting for another comrade with Nitin today. I don't know what they cannot came to this meeting, but it's important to link with these discussions all there. And so link to discuss, you need a revolutionary party in India. And the important part of this is the vanguard that are in front of these mass mobilizations of the Dalits. So if it's possible to have this three initiative, I think it'd be very good.
These are some very good suggestions, I believe, and I think definitely we can work on them. We already have some writings on the question of caste, but more needs to be written, of course, especially at this juncture when there is an international movement of sorts against racism and other oppressions. But the caste struggle is unfortunately not being shown as part of this narrative. That is exactly where I believe the international and we can cooperate and work together, definitely to bring this to the fore of the world and make it part of the global struggle. On that note, I would like Comrade Sajid to speak about his experiences and his views on this subject. He is a lawyer and activist from Pakistan. Comrade Sajid, boliye.
Because I just came for after 10 minutes or like this. It was discussing about the world, or what I should speak about Pakistan.
About the situation in Pakistan.
As well, we just are going to, we are in process to writing an article as well in about with a deep analysis. But now I'm just, I want to speak, as you all know about the Pakistan. If I go for the ancestors, our ancestors, they were telling us the Pakistan and Israel, that these two countries, they have made on the name of religion. And it is the big fashion about the religion. Whenever anyone want to do anything, the working class asking for the rights, then they put the religious forces in front, and they always use the slogan against India. And as well, you know about that, how the Indian ruling classes, they are using for, that is the religious chauvinism against each other. Actually, in Pakistan, if we see for 2.5 years ago, in Pakistan, the pillar, the most powerful, that definitely it is the military establishment. And why it is the big, it's in power. We all, if we go through the history, after the transformation of imperialism to American imperialism from British, they the pillar was of state made a more powerful, that is the military, and military establishment has been made by American. And we are saying that it is the more powerful, the pillar. And last 2.5 years ago, they brought a popular leadership in the name of popularism. But we can say that it is the Bonapartist regime under the leadership of Imran Khan. He was the the cricketer. They brought him in a rule. But for 2.5 years, on the name of, he came against the corruption, against the lawlessness. As well, we know that the ex-Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, from the party PLMLN, he was nominated in Panama Papers, and it kicked out by the Supreme Court, and as well by the back of military establishment. And now that in Pakistan, the working classes, we are seeing in a conscious level is going up, because now this slogan is not attractive. The India is the enemy of the Pakistan, and because what the ruling class always try to tell the masses. And the second one, everyone is discussing about the military establishment, how they are looting the country, how they have established the many financial organizations, even though they have some big foundations, and under those big foundations, 4 foundations are there, and those big foundations, they have established 152 institutions, the financial institutions, where they're getting the money they were distributing among the journals, and there is no accountability in budget or anywhere, because it is the property of those journals. And what was the crisis from last 2 years? Like it is CPEC, China, Pakistan economic corridor. They were started, and it's big project, financial project. And that after that project, it was because on contractors, they are fighting with each other on the name of contracts, because some the companies, they were registered by the military, and some they were the capitalist. And the conflict was that who will take the contracts in this, the CPAC. And otherwise as well, if we literally know about America and China, they have the conflict with each other about this project because it is a big project and China is involving in it everywhere, bringing labor, administrations, and even though in the politics and the big flares are, you can say, the draw flags like banners of Chinese Communist Party leadership. And now everywhere in Pakistan, you can say the corner of roads. If we see in Pakistan, in China is involving here much. And secondly, if we see the working classes, the working class for now it is awakening of the working class. They were fighting against the privatization, downsizing and right sizing, against these policies of IMF and World Bank. And Pakistan is, you can say it is the very much now stuck in a financial crisis of in a pandemic, and now they have no way to go. But when the working class is asking for the rights, then a new game has being in the field, and that the game is the opposition of the parties. They made a one Pakistan Democratic Alliance, Pakistan Democratic Movement, the PDM with a name. Now they are speaking that one the Bonapartist regime of Imran Khan, PTI, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Now they were speaking that this is he can be not rule, and it is selective by that military. And when it is the very popular slogan, the selective by the military, then they were coming to actually to the deal. And the masses, they were knowing about that how they are coming. But they were speaking about the powerful institution of the military, and it is very good that we were, but now we are saying it, obviously, it is the two sins, we can say the sins are there, and big is the military, and second one is the Democratic Alliance, that is the small one. It is sin, but we are compelled to not stop the people to speak against the military, but we are not favoring, or we don't favor the PDM, that Pakistan Democratic Movement, because we are just quiet and we keep our lip closed, but we are just we discussing in that the forces who are against the both, and our slogan and our discussion is definitely in our circles. We are telling our comrades and our cadres and sympathizer and our brother organization that they must out of one day. And we are hoping that in Pakistan, that is mostly it is, we can say, the pre-revolutionary situation is being in Pakistan, and it can be it take very less years to erupt to the revolutionary situation. And now the many solidarities, okay, from the organization to the Indian farmers, and now the people without fear, they were asking each other, they were just making solidarity. And I can say that as the comrade said, that the crisis is the crisis of the revolutionary leadership. And I repeat the Leon Trotsky that definitely it is a crisis, but we should be that very much concentrate strategically to the national sections, and definitely the theoretically for the international. And we have to go for the conferences to take the confidence of every section, every comrade, and we mix the culture of the international, and we let comrade to know the each and where every activity is now to be in field, in front, the comrades. And that's the way we can just build up the, with the national parties, we can build up the international party IWL.
This was very, this was a very enlightened presentation, Comrade Sajid. It seems to me that for the first time, people of Pakistan would be more willing to solidarize with their Indian class brothers than the Pakistani state. The enemy today is now at home, not just outside. This is a big opportunity for us, I believe, for a South Asian alliance of the oppressed. And the international has a big role here to play, that we can bring together these organizations across the subcontinent and across the world. So I believe we should move towards a conclusion for today's plenary. The struggles of the oppressed races in the Americas and the struggle of the oppressed castes, the lower castes in India. In many ways, we have a very similar struggle, and definitely this provides us grounds to give opportunities for solidarity across the country. Let us work together to build an understanding of each other's struggles. And from that, let us build a common strategy that is international in essence and national in action and implementation. For this, let us exchange theoretical documents, let us discuss. We should definitely have more plenaries like this, I believe, and work towards a common understanding, and from there a common strategy. Anyone else would like to speak? Mic is open.
It's very, Ajraj, it's very important if Nitin agreed with these proposals. It's very important because Nitin is linked with an important part of the rank and file of the Dalit movement. And it's very important that he discusses it with this rank and file, and particularly with the comrades that would come to this meeting today.
Comrade Nitin.
Actually, I tried to reach both the comrades. They spoken to me before our meeting started. They were both busy. So they unable to get connect with us today. But they given assurance to me that they will join our meeting.
Really, I do not listen what the things had said. It's very important. Please repeat the thing. It's very, we cannot listen what you said.
Oh, I just before this meeting, I tried to contact with both the comrades, but only I connected with Mohan. So he was busy, so he unable to connect with us today. But he said that he will definitely join for the next meeting.
Ajraj, listen what Nitin was talking.
I heard him clearly. He said that his comrade could not come today,
Yes.
but he has assured us that he will join us in our efforts. And in the next meeting, we will definitely be there.
Yes, I understand now. And so I would like to propose that we have a next meeting, another meeting, and 1 week or 2 weeks with these comrades, with the vanguard of the Dalits, with the comrades that is linked with Nitin. If we can discuss the article that Hathras, Pushkar, and Nitin are doing, to discuss it as a step to the building of a revolutionary party with links with the Dalit movements.
Definitely. We need to have Nitin and the other comrades from that movement on our side to write this.
It's possible to fix it, Nitin.
Yeah, it is possible.
And when we can fix it?
Actually, I'm busy with Saturday and Sunday. Later, I do not have any problem at the same time.
Next Tuesday.
Tuesdays.
Okay, no issue.
And so if it's possible to discuss about the caste movements in India, a theoretical and a political article about this, and discuss about this with these comrades, with this rank and file of the elite movement. And so it's possible to think in next meeting in Hathras and Pushkar and Nitin talking about this point with these comrades. In next Tuesday at same time is the agreement that we have.
That's a great idea.
Let's do it.
It's okay, Nitin?
Okay, no issue for me. It's good.
Fabio, can you send this statement for the solidarity to the movement to network solidarity international?
Yes, I can, but I just to be sure what we are talking about. You mean the statement of solidarity to the Dalit movement in Maharashtra, or do you mean the movement in solidarity, statement in solidarity to the farmers strike that happened?
Huh? The Dalit movement. The Dalit movement.
Okay. Okay, I make it.
You can send to the solidarity to the farmer, but you're talking now with that movement. So it's fixed to next week, okay?
Yes. So, comrades, let us conclude today.
Yes. I would like to send a revolutionary greeting to Blanca. It's 6 o'clock in the morning in the United States, and Blanca came to this meeting with the revolutionary posture, revolutionary positions. We have to.
Thank you. It's now 8, so it's getting more of a normal time.
2 hours after the beginning.
We began, yeah. Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here with you.
Okay. Revolutionary greeting to all comrades. Sajid, Nitin, Pushkar, Hathras,
Yes,
Fabio.
revolutionary greetings, sir.
Revolutionary greeting.
Salam.
Lal
Stop the good
salam.
work.
Revolutionary greeting.
Dar
Right.
salam.